Hi there, my name is Swetha Sivakumar. I research about food, I write about food, and this week we're going to be talking about breads. Let's talk a little bit about the history of bread, let's talk a little bit about the science of making breads, and let's look at the ingredients that go behind making a piece of bread. Let them eat cake is a phrase commonly attributed to, you would think it's Marie Antoinette. Although there is no historical record of her actually having said that statement, the phrase, the way it's popular, reflects the power of bread. You see, back in the times of French Revolution, the cost of bread was almost 80% of a peasant's living wage. So as the price got higher and higher, people could no longer afford it. People got angrier and angrier, leading eventually to the stages of the French Revolution. Another popular phrase, baker's dozen, it usually refers to the number 13, 14, or 15. What is going on? So in 10th century, around 10th century in England, there would be a town baker who would then collect all the dough that people would make, bake it for them, because oven was an extremely high investment piece of equipment, and then they would give it back to the people. When the people got it back, they suspected that the bakers were actually pinching a piece of dough for themselves. So then the ruling class, to keep the people happy, decreed that any baker suspected of such activities will be subject to huge fines and punishments. The bakers were like, whoa, we did not sign up for this. So they kind of threw in an extra loaf or two or even three to keep the people happy and to keep themselves clear. Let's look at a little bit about the science of bread. The Egyptians in 2000 BC kept out a slurry of flour and water. And lo and behold, over time, it started bubbling. And they took this magically bubbled up, batter, put it in a hot oven or a hot stone, and they found this wonderful, delicious crust was forming at the bottom, and the spongy interior was on the top. They ate it, they loved it. They attributed this bubbling to the gods. They thought the gods were doing something miraculous with the batter. In 17th century, Louis Pasteur looked in the microscope looked under the microscope and found yeast as the reason for fermentation in things like wine and bread and so on. Based on Louis Pasteur's work, the food manufacturers were then able to isolate the strain of yeast called the Saccharomyces cerevisiae and harvest them and make them, manufacture them and put them into these tiny sachets, like dry them out and called instant dry yeast. When you tear open the sachet of dry yeast and pour it into water, it wakens up again, and that bubbling water can now be added to your dough, and then you can add it'll then eat the sugars in the dough, and it'll release the carbon dioxide in, making the bread poofy. So if you think about it, the ingredients in the bread should be wheat, flour, water, salt, and yeast packet, yes? But then if you go to a supermarket and you look at all the ingredients in a supermarket bread, you'll find a rather long list. That's because in a mass-produced bread, they want to reduce the time that is given to fermentation. That sucks up inventory, it sucks up space, it takes up all the floor space and things like that. So the way they do that is they add dough conditioners to kind of do the work that yeast is doing through chemical means. They add emulsifiers to keep the dough soft, and then they add preservatives to keep mold from forming in the bread after it's been baked. So all these three type of agents are added to the dough and given to you in the supermarket. But let's say you wanted to have something that's fairly smaller list, clean ingredients, you can look at something called the sourdough bread. Now this is making a resurgence back into popularity during the pandemic. People ran out of yeast packets and they were wondering what to do. And so literally they went back to the times of Egypt where they started mixing flour and water and leaving it out. And then soon everybody's Instagram accounts were filled with, see my, sourdough bread. And they actually found out, and more and more people, although the traditional bakers always knew this, but more and more people started realizing that the sourdough bread is tastier and healthier and so on. Of course, it takes longer, and that comes with a cost. If you had to buy sourdough bread, it'll probably most likely be costlier than your white bread. But those are all the choices that you can make. And I hope that this little talk will help you understand a little bit about bread. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video with another food item. Thank you. Bye.